us. All right, so recording process. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Jane Linder. I'm the software product manager for the Student Success Suite, which is the combined student-facing systems that the Technology Center is responsible for across our entire system. And this is to talk about the retirement of the CCCApply download client, and to introduce you to the replacement technology for that, which is what we call SuperGlue for Apply. Jennifer Coleman, my boss, is going to welcome you all, and then we will jump right into our agenda, which is to let you know what the plan is for phasing out the download client, to talk about how we started that phase out with the Student Success Suite 1.0 and the new student account system, talk about our final download client release, which is available now, talk about SuperGlue and do our darndest to convince you that it's better than what you have now, and hopefully we'll succeed in that. And then talk about how our enabling services team can make the deployment easier for you, can try to take all of the heavy lifting off of you and leave you largely to supervise and consult. So we'll be turning over to my colleagues, Michael and Martin, for that. And we will have plenty of time for Q&A, and we will even do Q&A throughout as we get your questions. So what is the download client phase out plan? This is something that we have been talking about for many years. We formally announced it though in last fall, along with a lot of the talk around the Student Success Suite release. We wanted to give you as much time as possible. And so the phase out really started with the Student Success Suite 1.0 release in January, because the plan for this was to begin this fiscal year with any informational or new fields that aren't required for reporting or anything like that were going to be available in SuperGlue. And so the first release that happened was in January with the Student Success Suite. There were a handful of student fields that were specific to the new account system that are available really only through SuperGlue. And that was kind of the first phase. The final phase really starts this July, this fiscal year, where we're no longer going to be enhancing the download client. We will be maintaining it. If it breaks, obviously we're going to make sure that that gets fixed, but we're not going to be enhancing it anymore, even with legislated mandated updates. So the idea is to give you plenty of ramp time to get into SuperGlue, test it in parallel with the download client, and then transition off of that by the end of next fiscal year. All right, so let's talk about the first phase of transitioning out. For those of you who didn't know, we did with the new student account system at the start of the year, we had just a few fields that were available through SuperGlue for Apply that weren't available through the download client. Let me get to this page so you guys can take a look. We have a full write-up on all of this. And again, we continue to announce that these are only available through SuperGlue and not the download client. You can take a look at what these are. Again, these are not mandated fields, but they are, might be interesting information about the student that you guys can use to help your processes. So just so that you know that is available to you. And again, this is just optional informational fields, nothing that you have to report on. So the final download client release is not affecting the standard application. It's really just to support the new California College Promise Grant online application for 22-23. There are a couple new questions that are you guys need to collect that data. So obviously the download client has been updated for that, as well as SuperGlue. And this only applies to colleges who are using the online CCPG app. So if you are still just using the paper app, this won't affect you. But that data is available. And again, there's a public documentation page for this as well that gives you a breakdown, points you to the jar file that you need to update, and everything that you need. Any questions so far in the chat? Okay, onward. Now we get kind of into the meat of this. We really want to convince you that SuperGlue is better. So we're going to, I'm going to have my colleague, Mark Cohen, who is the product manager for the SuperGlue team, give you an overview of this. And then we'll talk about the security really specific to SuperGlue for Apply. Mark's going to touch on the performance and scalability that's been built into SuperGlue, and then we'll go over some frequently asked questions and try to, let you understand how we've really tried to make sure that there's built-in functions in SuperGlue to try to make this whole transition better. Mark, are you all set?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm Mark Cohen, product manager for infrastructure and data team at the California Community College Technology Center, and we work closely with Jane and the SSS team. On our side, we're working primarily with SuperGlue, CCC data, multiple measures, and eTranscript California. As far as SuperGlue is supported by the Core Applications Initiative from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. SuperGlue being the recognized and proven integration framework for the products of the California Community College's Technology Center, with 90 of those colleges already leveraging SuperGlue to connect to one or more service. We'll talk to what that means. If you could advance to the next slide. So the idea for SuperGlue grew out of the need for a universal adapter to connect data from a growing number of initiatives with the colleges and districts that make up our system. This image provides an example of how SuperGlue helps make these connections across the system. And then talking about our specific instance, Jane, if you can hit the, so with the yellow highlights, we see kind of an example of how data flows from CCCApply through the API gateway, that's part of SuperGlue, and from there through a service orchestration layer to an instance of the college adapter, which is the part of SuperGlue the colleges interface with. And from the adapter, application data may be moved directly into the college's student information system. So kind of a simplified view. And then here you see, as far as the darker blue, different products and areas that SuperGlue supports, and that will continue to grow as we leverage SuperGlue for more integrations. So do you want to advance to the next slide? You're muted, Jane.
Sorry, yeah, don't want to skip over security. So one of the questions that we have received from the field from colleges that have already switched to SuperGlue but wanted to know more about it is, how is this secure? This transactional level. It's not a file. It's not the way that the download client works. So what keeps it secure? And so we wanted to touch on some of that. There is no public facing access. So there's no attack vectors that anyone can access to intercept these transactions as the data is in transit. And the district is fully in control of being able to restrict all inbound traffic. So, again, we want to reassure you that really the districts, the colleges, your policies are in the driver's seat here with this system. The current adapter does not insert or interact with the core tables of your SIS. So what it does is the data is streamed to your SIS temp tables, or what they're called staging tables. We do not actually push it into the core tables for your SIS. This is something that, is a future enhancement perhaps, and Mark can talk a little bit more about that. But right now, really, this data just goes into a temp table, and then you can pick it up from there and you can send it to whatever systems you want, including the SIS. Because of this level of security, some of the most sensitive data, like the AB 620 LGBTQ fields, which there was a lot of concern about maintaining student privacy with this. That's not available in the download client. It is available through SuperGlue. So this is a way for you to access some of the fields that are not available in the download client. Any questions? Okay, Mark.
Sure. So in looking at, I talk kind of at a high level around the technology that makes up SuperGlue and guarantees a high level of performance and scalability. I'll stay at a high level there, though. If there are questions, we could drill down or handle that in chat. It does combine several technologies consisting of an application integration, service orchestration, API management, data integration, and data quality. And this is mostly through open source technologies that we're leveraging, primarily made up of Netflix, Zuul, and API Gateway. And Netflix Conductor. So these are technologies that were developed as open source by the Netflix team to support the movement of large amounts of data, Netflix being probably the largest source of traffic on the internet, and knowing the large volume of data that we exchange through our network across these various transactions, have looked to these technologies to support rapid deployment of data streams and to scale to that large number of transactions and supporting student applications and the movement of the data to the student information systems. So these technologies are serving that purpose well. Additionally, the team is currently working with Ellucian to complete an integration between SuperGlue and Ethos, and this will provide the ability for the CCCApply standard application to be delivered directly into Ethos and through Ethos and into the Ellucian offering that you may be working with. We are planning further integrations once that's in place with the International Promise Grant applications. And then also to note that I had mentioned before that there are 90 colleges that are currently deployed through SuperGlue. 73 of those colleges already have the CCCApply application staging tables in place to support the delivery of applications through SuperGlue.
Yeah, that's thanks for providing those statistics. And if I'm correct, quite a number of those who do use it for application data delivery have actually, in fact, turned off the download client already. So they're fully dependent on SuperGlue to deliver their data, and are using that on a daily basis. So I think one of the things with the Ethos integration and with any of the integrations and the functions that are provided with SuperGlue is when you install SuperGlue, you have the option to, turn on or turn off whatever features or functions or data streams that you want. You're set up to be able to get those should you wish to, but nobody is twisting your arm to take them. It's really, it's there for you to use it if you do or if you don't. So one of the things outside of outside of the application delivery is multiple measures. We have a partnership with ERP to provide some placement recommendations, and there are a number of schools who have then taken those recommendations and layered on their additional evaluations to come up with some really good processes for placing students. So but not every college has that turned on. And like we mentioned, there's 4 application types, and not every college is using every application type for online application data delivery.
It looks like we have a number of questions in the chat that have started popping up. So the first one is the future SG23 MIS data available in SuperGlue? There's concern about the availability of some of the data, such as mental and physical health.
SG23 data. I'm not sure that I'm familiar with that.
So at this point, what is shared via SuperGlue is anything coming from CCCApply. So if SG23 translates to a field in CCCApply, then it would be part of what is provided via SuperGlue. We are working on bidirectional SuperGlue focused around suspected fraud. But at this point, there are still limitations in terms of what is shared within SuperGlue. So it would depend on what that field is.
Yeah, a lot of since what the this is application data or application related data, like multiple measures. There's at this point there's really there's additional stuff that we know that the colleges layer on after they receive the application data to fill out the student profile. That's actually not part of SuperGlue.
So it looks like SG23 is student basic needs. So again, that would, as part of CCCApply, concern about the availability. If we're talking about access to the tables or the data flow, then that's something that is controllable. And of course, FERPA and other things come into play with regards to who should be given access and how that access is controlled with setup and those kinds of things. So that's something we can work with the individual colleges on if there are specific concerns.
Yes, anything that is delivered by SuperGlue is entirely controlled, by the district's policies for security.
Then speaking of security, are these data streams vulnerable? is the next question.
Yeah, so that's what we're saying. It's, it's not at rest and stored in a file someplace where somebody could hack it. It actually goes behind your firewall directly to your SIS tables. So, that's what we're saying when there's no attack vector in there for someone to be able to get to intercept it.
Right.
The next one is specific to colleague. If there are future updates to SuperGlue staging tables, how are they delivered? When installed, the SuperGlue staging tables are sent over a secure site that both the institution and tech center have access to. So how are updates made?
Yeah, so updates, we use Rancher and Docker to deploy updates. And Mark, if you want to jump in on more specifics, but typically when there's an enhancement, that's announced, especially with CCCApply, we have it in those public documentation pages, some of which I showed examples where, we'll discuss, they'll break down the fields and what's arriving, what's new. And there's typically with the version of SuperGlue that is shipped alongside of the changes to the student data. When there's new data or changed data, our enabling services team will update the adapters automatically. And the adapters have scripts that will create any new columns that are needed. And there you go. So actually a very, very easy deployment mechanism.
Right. You described that well. I don't have anything to add there.
And to add from the enabling services and support side, we notify the schools when those updates are deployed as well. So you're not left guessing whether you are on the current version. And, our team always stays on top of that with the versioning control and patch management for you.
The next one is somewhat related to that. We've been told we can restrict access with ACLs, but when we ask what we must permit, it includes *AmazonAWS.com and *Docker.com. Can that be narrowed down?
Martin might have the details on that.
Yeah, so these are all outbound flows, not inbound flows. And when we talk about Amazon right now is the environment that much of this information is coming from. So to restrict connectivity to the Amazon resources would prevent any data flows from occurring.
And again, I mean, this is not inbound. So
yeah, these are all outbound requests, which most districts, because most of the communication flows are on 443, they're usually allowed outbound.
Right, and Docker would reference the technology Jane was referencing that's used to make updates to the adapter.
So that's a good question. Any follow-ups on that? Because a good discussion. And obviously, this is all can be gone into in detail. Once you reach out to look into installing this, enabling services has a lot more detail than we're going to get into here. Great.
That's it in terms of current questions. Thanks, Jane.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And thank you, Mark, for the SuperGlue overview. I was going to tackle the SuperGlue for Apply slide. This is the slice of the SuperGlue integrations platform that delivers all of this data that we're talking about. Again, I already mentioned it supports all of the online application types that we have, and we do not twist your arm about taking all of them. It's just whatever you want to use. We've had a lot of great feedback from the colleges who've taken on things like the non-credit application and other applications other than the standard app. It's really cut down their processing to have this data delivered to them within microseconds on average, and that full data set. And the thing that's very nice about getting this data is you have a fully auditable record. So you get the full record delivered. You can pick and choose what fields you want and format them, as you do with the download client, but you get that fully auditable record. So if anything goes wrong with the processes, pushing that into your SIS system that you've developed, you can always go back to that original record. Any other questions on these data streams? Okay, moving on. All right, so here's some frequently asked questions that have come from our work with the colleges who have already deployed SuperGlue, as well as from the field as we announced this in the fall. How do I know student application data has been delivered? And so, like I said, on average, it happens within seconds. It's very close to real time. We do have a flag that confirms the data has been delivered to the staging table. So there's an ACK sent when the record's written, and then we store that on the application record. So that is available. What happens when the SIS or the ERP system is down, when that connectivity is lost? And that happens often through routine maintenance, or sometimes if you're migrating systems or databases or whatever. As long as it's under 2 weeks that your system is down, transaction delivery is paused. And so that routine maintenance really isn't a problem. It's paused and then restarted automatically when connectivity is stored. The transactions are put in a running state, and then they go through the queue and they deliver. So if it's more than 14 days, that's when we might have to do this process, which is there a way to resend transactions similar to the reset download utility? Transactions, as I mentioned, unless it's over 2 weeks, which we all know that a downtime or interruption to the SIS system of that level, there's other problems. But if that happens, then you would need to contact our staff support. We have a utility to rerun transactions. It's actually coded on the same basis as the reset download that's available through CCCApply Administrator. Right now, we're having our staff support do these reruns, even though they are available to administrators, because we just need to actually finish our documentation and training. So in the time being, we want to do that. Also, we didn't want to actually get rid of the reset download and replace it with a SuperGlue reset. While we're phasing this out, we want you to have the ability to have both systems in parallel. But in July, we are planning to deliver some documentation and information on how you can do this in SuperGlue. It's there, it's in production. We just want to have time to actually document it thoroughly for you and provide you with that documentation. In the meantime, contact staff support through a Zendesk, and we will take care of it for you. Again, this is typically not needed. So,
hey, Jan, there's a couple more questions that we've got in chat.
Sure.
Alrighty. So there was a question about non-English support in the application that I think I already took care of. There's another here. Hi there. We've been told by our security officer that the Docker and Rancher versions are end of life. Is that still true?
Not that I'm aware of. Martin, have you heard anything about that?
Well, yeah, no, technically the Docker version is end of life, but still supported. And as far as Rancher, the Rancher instance as well is already in progress of being upgraded to version 2 in the environment. So we anticipate once that uplift has completed, we'll effectively be able to upgrade any Docker related instance up to the latest and greatest as well.
Okay, so the plan is to transition to the latest versions, and it's in progress.
But
sorry, Mike, real quick. And from a security standpoint, it's not a once and done thing. We have process in place on the program side to continue engage with the security center for monitoring of vulnerabilities, not just end of life, but also ongoing threats that these technologies that we use are facing, so that we take action that is necessary and keep the schools informed as well. So that protocol is now being put in place as well. So as we move forward, the schools on the field will hear about security threats and what we at the tech center on the product side are doing to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, thank you, MRT. That's a good point. Any other questions, Mike?
Yep, there's a couple more. So Michael's back, says, piggybacking on my last question, initial installation, we use CPIE to create custom packages in the colleague side and then use MSUG. That's for future updates. New fields won't require new CPIE and MSUG for those new fields.
And this is colleague?
Yes.
Okay, Martin, do you know the answer to that? Otherwise, we might need to actually reach out and follow up when we do a follow-up to the webinar where we any questions we couldn't answer, we'll answer in that. And I am not a colleague expert. I know enough to probably get me in trouble. So rather than answering and having to take it back, I will probably table that question and reach out to our colleague expert developer.
Right, but in general, any any new data items are in fact delivered as a colleague patch to augment it. And
Right. That's part of those scripts I mentioned, which
exactly.
is my product manager speak for really high level. So does that answer your question? Because we can follow up on that with more detail.
I will let you know if they respond. A couple more in here. So Joseph asks if ever a piece of data is not delivered, such as middle name, when those are pushed through again, will it append the missing data to the same record?
Okay. Well, Mike, I think you know the answer to that one, right? Which is the middle name, it sounds like, is not going to be able to be rerun.
Sorry, I'm on mute here. But that is the case. But like if a piece of non-required data does show up at a future time, it would come as part of a new application.
Yes.
But of course, the flip side of that is like if it is a required piece of data, we have front end validation that would prevent an application from being submitted in the first place.
Right.
So we wouldn't append it in that case, and we're not allowed to modify submitted applications as well. So that's where
submitted applications are need to be cast in stone by law regulations. So yeah, we don't append that.
All right. Liz says +1 for enabling services. Their ability to translate an extremely esoteric security ecosystem to something regular admins can see the value of. Super helpful. Many thanks. So that's great. Thanks, Liz. And we echo that. Enabling services is great.
Yep, there are heroes.
Let's see. Laura says, sorry, I have a CCCApply paper application question. Will you have the updated paper application to mirror the online application? Also, is there a plan for, sorry, the chat here is like scrolling up. Also, Is there a plan for the paper application to also be available in Spanish?
We actually don't do paper apps of any way, shape, or form. Our charter has always been to support the online application, and so that's what we do. Paper apps have always been generated by colleges on a per college basis.
All right. Last question for now. It seems like we are planning to move colleague to the Ellucian SaaS cloud. Any implications regarding SuperGlue for our cloud migration?
Mark, are you able to address that?
I could, though. My understanding is that the data would be delivered to a staging table, but we're working through the Ethos integration that will provide a more direct path into colleague in that instance. Right. Yeah. So so again, that is in progress for all of our application types, and again, this is it's something that's available to you to use, is the Ethos integration, which does use their APIs to manage the business logic and insert that data.
And if I can, sorry, Mike, real quick piggyback on Mark's response, from a prioritization standpoint, enabling services and support team, the college relationship managers are going to be reaching out to the field, to the schools, to understand how many of the schools have a SaaS migration in the radar, in the roadmap here in the near future. So we can use that data to help influence the prioritizations internally. So when that survey comes out, if you could respond, that would be terrific. It would really help us, help prioritize things here internally.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we are always in need of feedback from the field.
One last note, Laura points out that the CCCApply website does have the paper application posted. I indicated that is correct. We just aren't the ones who maintain the paper application. So we can provide contact information for the group that does, if that's helpful.
Yes. Yeah, we can.
Thanks. I just want to interject there. Laura, I'm going to be your contact for that. This is Sandoval Chagoya at the Tech Center. I will send you my email address. Bottom line on that is the foundation is responsible for the paper issue. So if you need an update, I can facilitate that for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandoval. All right. Thank you, Laura.
That's it, Jane.
Okay, great. So steps to a swift, successful SuperGlue deployment. I am going to hand this off to my enabling services comrades.
Thanks, Jane. Good afternoon, everyone. for those who don't know me, I'm Michael Tathuaswamy. I'm the Director of Enabling Services and Support. And real quick, for those who have not had the pleasure of working with us or new to the system, haven't heard about us, Enabling Services is your deployment team, but we focus on not just deploying, but we are focused on helping help you get the most out of the implementations on the products you deploy from the tech center. So we focus on improving your adoption rate. And we have a single point of contact. So if you're looking to get started with either SuperGlue deployment or any of the other products, your single point of contact is your college relationship managers. And you have to just remember this one email address. You drop an email out to them, they will identify who, and reach out to you and get you going on implementation. Now, talking specifically about SuperGlue, our implementation engineers here at Enabling Services can do most of the work for you. Martin, in the next slide, will go into the details, but our typical deployments are anywhere in 2 to 4 weeks. We have even completed deployments in 1 week period. It depends on your resources availability. And in the next slide, we will talk about what is our ask, what is it that your team will be responsible for completing when it comes to SuperGlue deployment. As you heard earlier, we support PeopleSoft Colleague, but also any custom SIS that you might have in place, or if you're adopting Workday, we can work with you to get the data delivered to a staging table that you're in. As you see here, we are primed and standing by to help you finish deploying the product, SuperGlue, before the download client goes away. But I would also like to add that we have systems and resources in place to help you adopt SuperGlue by end of this fiscal year if you want to make a move. So please reach out to the college relationship managers and they can get you going. I would also like to quickly add, for those who have already deployed SuperGlue and are looking to move away from download client and looking for additional help, please reach out to your college relationship managers or the project manager who you work with. We are in a position to share what some of the schools in the field are doing. So we will share best practices. And we will also take the opportunity to understand what assistance we can provide your team to help finish that migration. And last but not least, for those schools who are wanting to deploy SuperGlue, but have some resource constraints and aren't able to move forward at this time, if you could reach out to your college relationship manager, let us know what resources, additional help will help you move forward with the implementation. We want to look at that data that we collect from you, formulate a plan, create a proposal, and present it to the Chancellor's office for consideration for any additional resources that will help you get there. So please reach out, let us know how we can help, and we are standing by.
Yes, please don't, think you can't do it, because we do know we have a number of colleges in our system who don't have a very broad IT staff. And this shift does mean that you need to, you need to have that piece where you pull the data from the staging table and get it into your other systems where you want that data delivered, whether it's your SIS system or maybe a CRM system or something like that. Don't let the fact that you don't have IT resources to help stop you. Reach out to us and we will do everything possible to get you there.
Thanks, Jane. On to Martin. So if you could go to the next slide, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Martin Rudd. I'm one of the implementation configuration engineers that would be assisting you in implementing the deployment of the college adapter. And what we typically ask are the things that we have absolutely no visibility or connectivity to accomplish ourselves. The first and foremost is working with your IT resources that are comfortable with establishing the virtual machine environments. We'll need those resources to assist in creating the 2 Linux appliances that we would use for the adapter, one for a production environment, one for a non-prod sandbox environment. Those resources should be pretty confident and comfortable with creating the virtual machine in its bare metal form, we would then need their assistance to put on the Ubuntu 1804 LTS instance. This long-term service version of Ubuntu has service support and security support out to 2028. And we most likely will be able to upgrade that to the latest version with a new implementation of Rancher version 2 that I had indicated earlier. Once you have those instances, the other ask would be most likely be from a DBA, and we would need your assistance in creating the initial staging tables and creating the credentials necessary to allow the adapter to communicate with those staging tables to deliver applications. And then finally, we may require the assistance of a network administrator to address any connectivity related issues that the adapter might require to reach out to resources. Also, depending on the comfort level of your IT group with the version of Linux that we're deploying, we're standing by to be able to complete that process for you. Or if there's that level of comfort on your side, we could provide the post-build processes and they could assist in implementing that relatively quickly. And that's about the only real ask that we require. Again, it's because we ourselves don't have access to your VM console environments, nor do we have direct connectivity and access to your database environments to create the staging tables or the network configuration. But in most cases, we're relying on IT folks that should be very well versed and comfortable with those processes.
Yep. And again, you know, the level of involvement of the enabling services team is entirely in the hands of the colleges. So whatever you want us to if you want us to step in and to take a little bit more off the plate of your team, we can do that. Otherwise, you know, the collaboration between the teams is very, very good too. So.
Yeah, and a good point. You know, if you are in the cloud, we may have to interact with your cloud administrators in that regard.
Yeah. Any questions we need to address, Mike?
Let's see here. Nothing new. There's some collaboration from Michael with some of the earlier questions, but nothing for presenters. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for attending. I hope we have given a good pitch for the fact that there's no need to panic. You've got a long runway. We would recommend that you reach out to enabling services sooner though, rather than later to get things started. The real benefit is you have some time where you could run both a download client and SuperGlue in parallel, which gives you an eye to cross-referencing and to seeing and getting familiar with you know, how SuperGlue works before you're forced off of the download client. So take advantage of that time. There are a couple of last minute questions trickling in here. Sure. All right, so the first one, is the decrypted LGBTQ+ data available via SuperGlue?
It is available through SuperGlue and not through the download client. Yes.
All right. And then starting in February, the non-credit application stopped including the SSN as a question on the application. We have been in talks with staff support regarding this, but if you have any further information, that would be helpful. Thank you.
We do. When we removed the Social Security number from the account, you know, the non-credit app has never required the Social Security number. And when we removed it from the CCC account, which was one of the major recommendations for making that a lot easier for students to create, we, you know, lost that connection other than through the standard application. So we are in discussion on that. We had a similar issue with the CCPG at first, and that's been attended to. So when a student has a standard application, we simply pull the SSN from that account and send it through the CCPG, because CCPG also does not require SSN. So we are in discussions on, what can be done to address that. I can't give you anything more because this is relatively new coming up. Mike, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Nope, that is correct. I haven't heard one way or the other, but it's something that we've discussed. And here is the last and perhaps most succinct question of the webinar. When will we be forced to not use the download client?
I'm going to say that mainly what's going to happen is it's going to get irrelevant, right? It's going to continue to get more and more irrelevant because it's not going to be enhanced. And then after June 2023, it's not going to be maintained. Obviously, we are not going to go out and rip it out of your system. So it really just comes down to the fact that it's going to continue to be more and more irrelevant.
Jane, that was a question that came up earlier from one of our schools. So if you could provide a little bit clarity on that.
Yeah.
Come June, June 2023, will our service, backend service, stop delivering data to the download client or interacting? Will our infrastructure go away?
I think right now that's actually in discussion. We originally, the original plan was just to continue to let it go, but then if it breaks or whatever, it's kind of broken, rather than turning off the tap. I know that some of our executives want to make a clean break. So we will let you know that. But what I would say is don't count on it. After June 2023, all bets are off. But again, we're trying to make this transition as easy as possible.
All right, we are continuing to get questions here. We are still seeing the issue where a student creates a second CCCApply account. Will SuperGlue act differently for this?
So in other words, they can't recover their account and they create a second account and then register with that. Duplicate accounts, that is still going to happen. It's really down to, Mike, I don't know. I mean, we really have no way to dedupe if the student's truly using like a different phone number and a different email. What I will say is, we have noticed fewer duplicate accounts being allowed because students are especially restricted by their phone number, and that's something they tend to have with them for a long time. Email accounts, they can kind of spin up, but not so much phone number. But yeah, that duplicate accounts can continue to be an issue.
Yep, that is the case. We would consider if they have separate CCC IDs, they are separate as far as our account system is concerned. So let's see, will new provisions be added to prevent fraudulent applications?
New provisions are being added weekly and actually almost daily. Whenever we have a spam filter that is constantly updating based on information we glean from the field and from other about bad actors and so forth from other places. We are constantly updating that. I can't get into details because the Inspector General has ordered us not to get into details on our fraud prevention. But should you want to know all of the gory details, we have a private spam forum that's available through our staff staff support site, which is down there in that third bullet that's on this slide, the ccctechnology.info site. If you have an account and register to that, you can reach out to me and say, I want to belong to the private spam forum. The only way you can join is with me approving you. So please do reach out to me if you want to join that. We post discussions. We post our spam filter meetings and other fraud forums where we discuss the details in a more private manner. So reach out and we can give more information there.
Let's see, next one. Will the LGBTQ plus data still be available in the data warehouse?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. That is always available there. It's just, that's typically only available to your institutional researchers rather than being delivered with the application data to the college.
Okay, a couple more comments here about duplicate accounts. I've had 20 in the last month, and then another one that says we don't just see dupes, we've seen a handful of triples. So I want to be clear here. This isn't the account system accidentally creating dupes through some bug that is occurring. This is students literally creating duplicate accounts because either they, have forgotten their previous credentials and they don't find success with the recover account, perhaps they, just think it's faster for them to create another account than to recover their previous account. Could be any number of reasons, but this is student action that's being taken. So the new account system did come with a vastly improved account recovery workflow. And we do our best via our help desk to direct students to reuse existing accounts when we can get in contact with those folks.
Yeah, one thing that's coming out is because our account system is in a sense like a lot of other account systems where we're now restricting them to, a specific email and phone number associated and so forth. It's almost like I think students don't fully understand that creating a new account for some other account on, some shopping account or something like that, that's not a problem, but creating a new account for our system is. I think there's a lack of understanding of that we need to address. So, and I've been thinking about that, maybe there's some way we can, as part of the account recovery logic, give them some messaging, because I think they don't understand that it's actually really important that in this instance, they don't create duplicate accounts. So give me your feedback on that. I'd like to hear more from the field.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Let's see here. So can we use the user fields in the SuperGlue table? Let's see, and they've got in parens here, xctc.ca.user123 as an example.
Use them for what? For your own data?
Use them in the SuperGlue table.
It's probably directed at Martin or something that we'll need to follow up on.
Yeah, because I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah, that sounded like a colleague table. User 1, user 2, user 3. I'm not familiar. I don't believe that's part of the application. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure I understand the context of the question.
Please reach out to me with that. And like I say, I'm not a colleague expert. I know there's a lot of tribal knowledge in that particular SIS. So please reach out and we can refer your questions to our experts who can give us a more complete answer.
See another one here. Will CCCApply ever be SSO for applicants sent from our portal with a CCC ID?
So SSO from the college portal.
Right. You'd think, I'm reasonably
In other words, it sounds like they log into the student portal and then rather than having to go to CCCApply and log in, be able to SSO. That's a very good enhancement request. We've actually had a similar request to that when it comes to other products, like can we SSO to Canvas from MyPath? And so we have looked at what it would take to do that, but at this point, this is the first time I've received that request. So I would like to log that as an enhancement request and look into it.
Yeah, we do that now with MyPath for what it's worth. Users do not log into the portal and then log in again when they get to MyPath. So
right.
Yeah.
So we should check it out and test it and see what it might take. Yeah, we will look into that.
Martin, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, again, it's more of a contextual question. So understanding the ask and why would be beneficial.
Yeah.
But in general, I think there's a lot of interconnectivity between a district's IDP as well as the Open CCC, where we have integrations there as well as what's being passed on to MyPath, Canvas, CVC. All of these services that are leveraged with the SSO gateway can be managed from either their IDP or some other authentication server.
Yeah, so reach out and let us know exactly what you're looking for, and let's start the conversation, and we can log that as an enhancement request because I think that would certainly be very beneficial to our students.
All right, so some more here. So somebody following up to the question about the user fields in the SuperGlue table, an idea to store potentially college ID in that field, and then Michael following up by indicating that you can in fact use the field for that. Let's see here. So Philip says, if we identify dupes for you, would it be helpful so that you can reach out to students and find out why they created a second account?
I would actually be very interested in doing that for research purposes. So if you can provide me with those, I would actually like to find out, because we worked a lot with student testers. We had three phases of student testing for the new account system. But no matter how much you test, there are things that crop up when you ship to production that, when you're actually getting it hit by, tens of thousands of students, and they do things differently. And I would like to understand more why this is happening. So yeah, I would like that. I'd like to take that on. Yeah.
All right, so they keep coming. Just a clarification question on the download client, no modifications, new fields after 7/1/22, but existing fields will be available until June 2023.
Yes.
For multiple college districts, do we need staging table for each college?
It depends, I believe, on how you want to set it up. Isn't that right, Martin?
No, we do a single district level staging table. Applications that flow in it are specific to the district, but each application has a college ID associated with it. So you'll know which application, which college within the district that application is specific for.
Okay. Any follow-up question on that?
Nothing yet.
We are here and for another 8 minutes, so take your time.
All right, here's another one. Current students who can't remember their CCCApply credentials after we've told them they need to submit a new application may create a new account instead. They have a CCC ID already from before. Yeah, and so that is why we have account recovery workflows. So the intention would be they don't necessarily need to remember their CCCApply credentials. They can provide us other information, and we will help identify their account and get them recovered. That's the intention. It is possible sometimes that perhaps they might not remember even the email address they registered with, and so on and so forth. So that could lead potentially to a duplicate. But again, our account recovery workflow is vastly improved over what it was before. And so the hope is that, we'll see these numbers dwindle.
Yeah, in a sense, they don't need to remember it, because as part of the account, their email, because as part of the account recovery, they can enter their date of birth and their last name. And then, we would actually say, well, we're going to, we can send you a reset link to, and it'll give the email address. It's largely masked, but there's typically enough unmasked that it should jog their memory. So yeah, the account recovery process has vastly improved with that.
Yeah, that is the case. And I suppose what I really meant to say was that sometimes perhaps they've lost access to the email address that they were.
Yes, actually, that's another issue.
That can be a problem. And so I would be curious to know if that is, maybe the root cause of some of these duplicates that we're seeing, because they just can't get to the account that they would need to be able to recover their old, their old account. But again, perhaps our investigation into these dupes when you provide them would be something we could take a look at.
Yeah, it would be good to know.
So let's see here. Would I be able to get a copy of the recording of this meeting for my supervisor and dean who were not able to attend this meeting? Sandoval?
Yeah, confirmed. Hey, Paul, we're on about a 5 to 10 day turnaround at this point. That's generally based on accessibility remediation. As soon as we've achieved that, we will post this on our website, but we will also go back out to the distribution list and let you know that it's available via email as well. So just an approximation, 5 to 10 days, and this will be publicly available. Thank you.
Yeah, and in addition to the recording, we send out a follow-up where we will try to round up on some of these frequently asked questions, but also with the links that I showed you to the public doc that actually talk about the phase out, that talk about the fields that were available in the release in January that are not available any other way than SuperGlue, and touch on some of these other points and information that we've shared so that you can have it all in one neat package.
So Matt here provides some context as some of the reasons we see dupes. Local high school students are encouraged to apply just in case they don't get into a 4-year, so they get a CCC ID. They don't attend our college, but a few years later, they need to, can't remember their credentials, or signed up using their high school email, which is no longer valid, and they create a dupe. So yeah, that's kind of what we were saying. Sometimes they do lose access to their high school email address. And so to be clear, in those situations, we can help them if they call in and say, I have an account, and the help desk staff can actually reassign the email address in that account to a new one that they then have access to. That is possible.
Yeah, and typically they want them to verify their identity, because we don't want to open the door to any fraudulent activity. So that is part of it. But yes, calling the support staff is always a great thing to do. And the good news is that, originally with the new account system, we had long wait times, and that's not happening anymore.
Yeah. So for anybody who happens to be hearing about things like this happening at their college, that is a potential solution for these students. Have them call the help desk. We can change their email address. Let's see here. Will fraudulent applications be removed or otherwise identified in staging tables?
The fraudulent, the way that we intervene with fraudulent applications is prior to delivery. So the spam filter will evaluate every application submitted, and it, via this logic that is constantly being updated, and it will apply a score, a fraud score to that, a spam score, and based on what that score is, it will prevent it from being delivered to the staging tables. And then what has to happen is a administrator at the college needs to go and free up those that they deem, review those and free up the ones that are legitimate. And then those get delivered. Now, we do have some that get through. In fact, we are, like I say, constantly evaluating why this is, but it's not 100%. And we don't, so once it's delivered to your staging table, it's actually up to the colleges to identify those with their processes. And then there's a process to report those back that the chancellor's office has initiated. And that way, we can kind of close the loop that way. We've always had to balance with the application data, the desire to stop the fraudulent applications with also a highly important desire not to block too many legitimate students. And so we do acknowledge that we're not going to get that balance always 100% right. So there is a need for the colleges to have some evaluations as well. We are having a user group meeting at 2 p.m. today, where we'll actually discuss briefly some of the ways we're improving the spam filter and providing you more data to do that. So that's a plug for that meeting.
Let's see here. Are they told to call support staff if they do not have access to example email address anymore? So there isn't text that specifically says, if you don't have access to your email anymore, please call the support staff. But there is indication at the end of the account recovery workflow that if they need further support, this is the phone number to call, basically.
Yes. So if they're blocked, it will tell them to call support.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we could look at potentially an expansion of that text as a remediation solution. I would just be curious to know if that particular use case is happening so often that it would make sense to display that text to everybody.
Yeah. So it would be good to hear from the field, from those of you here. Please reach out to me and let me know what you know of how frequently that occurs. And then also if you have some duplicate students that I could talk to, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great idea.
Yep. We are constantly analyzing this stuff for improvement.
Yep. And then Matt asking, can I get an invite to that meeting?
Yes, you can. Reach out to me and I will get that to you immediately after this meeting. All right. Are we good?
Yeah. I don't see any further questions.
All right. So I think that means we can stop the recording, Sandoval, and wrap it up.
Very good. Thanks everyone for attending and to our presenters today as well. Appreciate it.